following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, I'm Carl Seidel, host of The People's View, sponsored by the Nashua City Republican Committee. And if you want, we meet at the Crown Plaza the second Thursday of every month. And if you want to find out more information, you can go to our website at nashuagop.org.
Welcome to The People's View.
Hello, and help me welcome Jack Flanagan, our Honorable Jack Flanagan, who's a third-term rep now.
Third term, yeah.
And previously, actually, was majority leader.
That's correct. We met and we were in your show about a year ago, I think it was, when I was the majority leader.
And now you've decided to run for bigger offices.
Yes, I'm a candidate for the Congressional District 2, the U.S. House of Representatives. Yeah.
So you'll be running against Annie Custer.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
And anyway, what made you decide that? You have a background in, you've been here, 3 years, and you've you're in different committees. And
right, I'm actually in my third term. Yeah. So that'd be 6 years. I know time flies.
Excuse me, yeah.
That's okay. What happened was when I was a freshman, I knew there were certain things that needed to be done in the state. In other words, to entice businesses, cut business taxes, workers' comp reform, energy. There were issues as it relates to education. Common Core was one, the testing that we deal with at the local level. And what happened was when I became majority leader, I saw the opportunity to try to, shall we say, direct those pieces of legislation through. And we were successful. And now I'm sitting there going, what do I want to do when I grow up? And I discovered it was to be a legislator. And as you well know, we're not going to be rich up in Concord, and that's not the objective, of course. But I thought there would be an opportunity to make an impact in Washington.
Well, certainly needs an impact somehow.
Oh, we could spend hours talking about the problems in Washington, D.C.
That's right. Yeah, well, what particular thing that you're going to emphasize in your campaign?
Balanced budget, first of all. Okay. I actually co-sponsored a constitutional amendment in this state as it relates to balanced budgets. In about 10 years, we're going to see the second largest expense in the federal budget being interest on the debt.
That's right.
And what I would like to see is to get a balanced budget amendment in, and then take that money that we're spending on debt and use it to help prop up Social Security. A lot of us are going to be looking for Social Security pretty soon, and I hope and pray that it's going to be there for all of us.
And hopefully they don't tax it anymore.
Well, I had a conversation. It's funny. I had a conversation with a gentleman at a city group, GOP group, and he was complaining that he pays taxes on his Social Security. Yeah. And I did a little research, and Social Security is pre-tax. So when you get it, it's like your IRA distribution. The feds look at it that way. They give it, they only tax it up to 85%, but he was commenting that he had to work a couple jobs and get his Social Security to make ends meet. So that probably should be looked at.
I think very much so. There's a lot of people that don't like that. I mean, it wasn't that way, what was it, 20 years ago?
There's a lot of things that 20 years ago that no one anticipated with Social Security, like our longevity. I think when Social Security was established, our life expectancy was about 65 or 70. I mean, and now look at us. I mean,
and lots of people say if we just put it in some kind of a basic fund, you probably would have had a lot more money.
You could.
Then you wouldn't holler about paying a tax.
You could, but the most people who pay into Social Security are getting more than they put in anyway. Not only because of their lifespan, but also just the way that the fund works. Because the federal government does make money on it if they invest it correctly. But, I mean, that's work in progress, I think, at this point in time.
Well, balancing the budget, how do we do that? I mean, that's going to be, Kasich is the one that's doing the talk about that, and he's done a good job back in the 90s. Right. But the economy was really going well.
Yeah, I to be personally honest with you, is I think with all the regulations businesses are seeing right now, they're just now recovering. It's been almost 8 years. Normally recessions last about a year and a half. That a lot of the problems in our economy are based in Washington, and not so much on the individual consumer. But yeah, you're right. Governor Kasich was the last one, I think, to balance the federal budget. I think in 2012, Paul Ryan, the current speaker, had a plan to balance the budget too. I haven't seen all the details in it, but I think there are enough people that have dealt with the finances in Washington that would be able to do it. It's just a matter of making tough decisions. Nobody wants to say no.
Well, you have some of the presidential candidates saying that they'll make the government smaller and stop spending the money. You think that has any
Traction.
chance to happen?
I'd have to see the where they want to make the changes. I mean, what I'm hearing a lot of is block granting. For example, the Department of Education. I mean, that could be changed to where the federal government doesn't really need to be in the educational business. So, you know, there's a lot of opportunities that the federal government can do. I just think it means courage to do it.
Well, you could just change that around instead of taxing to get the money to make the
Leave
block
it here.
grants. Leave it here.
Yeah, that's true too.
Or
That's
it
true, too.
starts. I mean,
Well, on the education front, I mean, the U.S. Constitution has nothing in it about education.
That's right.
All the states' constitution do. So, I mean, one could argue that why do they even have that agency there?
Right.
So that's something that one would have to look at. The Environmental Protection Agency is doing things that they really are not authorized to, but based on agency rules, they're doing it. The Department of Energy.
There's another one.
I honestly, their charge was based back in the 70s, and the whole atmosphere about, you know, what do we do after we run out of gasoline? Well, it's been, what, 45 years?
Well, the Department of Energy, who I've had a lot of experience with because I've done work for them and with them, is not very well run and never has been organization. It seems to me, from what I could tell in my interaction with them, it's a place where they can use it very interestingly to back up any politician in a particular state who needs to have some jobs.
Oh, like a slush fund for projects.
They always had projects that they could apply any place.
This is the Department of Energy or Department of Transportation?
Department of Energy.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I know we rely on, in your area of expertise, the Department of Transportation and Public Works. We rely upon them a lot in this state.
Definitely.
But I've never heard of a project of Department of Energy.
Well, yeah, you find different energy projects.
Well, like renewables and things like that?
That and TBA and the dams, you know, the nuclear power.
Sure.
They have a lot of things that they get involved in. A lot of different facilities that are around the country. There must be 30 or 40 different types of facilities that they run.
Well, if I get there, we'll have to take a look at it. One of the things that, even in Concord, when I got up there, was efficiencies.
Yeah.
I don't like wasteful government.
Right.
You know, my background's been in local government, and, you know, you take care of the nickels and dimes, the dollars take care of themselves philosophy. But at least in the town of Brookline, where I'm from, is that, you know, I think efficient government, even in Concord, was something that I've always strived for. As a matter of fact, I had a bill, I don't know if you remember the bounty bill that I had put in, that we empowered the employees of the suggestion box.
Yeah, yes.
There was a RSA,
right.
a law that said that if they put in a suggestion, they'd make $250, but the trouble is they're jeopardizing their job if they're giving some information as it relates to waste or fraud or abuse. So I had introduced legislation that said they'd get 10% of the savings, up to a cap, I think it was. And I kept trying. I couldn't get any traction on it, probably because of the way they do their budgets. But same thing, is I have a very difficult problem with waste.
Well, I agree with you. I think that's why you need some management in there. Almost every agency, especially the bigger ones, need good management. And the way they apply the bonuses, too, I think, is not... There's no oversight on it.
Well, I mean, you want to talk about mismanagement, too. Look at the veterans that we have, the problems that we're having with the VA. I mean, right now, we hear about the vets that are dying waiting for medical care. Well, there are vets that are committing suicide because they can't get their cases as long-term injury adjudicated. It takes almost 2 years.
Yeah.
Literally, we're losing a vet almost every hour of every day based on the fact that they're not getting what they needed. I think that's
atrocious the way it's run, and it's coming out in the newspapers now that we're having it here. The things that came up in Arizona or wherever it was, where they were actually dying a lot of them.
Yeah.
But
Let me just add one other thing too, Carl, is that when talking to some of the veterans, they're not unhappy with the service that they're getting here. It's just the ability to get it. I
that's
think
right.
is
It's the
the problem.
timing.
Yeah.
I mean, right now when they're fudging
Fudging the
lists.
numbers, yes.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely. Yeah.
well, you set up some rules, and people will find a way of getting around them, one way or another.
Yeah.
You don't collect the data, you can't say I'm not doing it right.
Right, right. But it's blatantly obvious that some of these, or all of these people, don't deserve any bonuses per se when we have this situation going on. I mean, it's funny, when I do presentations, I have a laundry list of Dodd-Frank. There's issues of Obamacare. I mean, I'm one of those few people that think that we need a centralized location for health care. It's not necessarily Obamacare, but it might be something like it. I like the idea that you can buy insurance online and pick your carrier, pick your deductibles, and so on and so forth. But there are problems associated with that too. This Iranian deal, $150 billion to people that want to kill us.
Yeah.
And right now they're basically thumbing their nose at us and saying, you're not going to come in and see what we're doing now. I mean, there's just some bad decisions. The refugee situation.
Oh, that's terrible.
I mean, when the CIA director says that they cannot tell us whether or not any of these people are terrorists, it's like the analogy that you might see on Facebook. It's like if you were drinking a cup of coffee and in the sugar bowl with 100 grains of sugar, but 10 of these grains were poisonous.
Cyanide.
Would you still scoop out?
That's right.
I mean, and my opponent, Andy Custer, they wanted us to take 10,000 of these refugees.
They still do.
Yeah, well, she signed a letter saying that she wanted 100,000.
Oh, really?
There were members of the House, I think, that sent a letter to President Obama saying that they wanted 100,000 of the people. And the solution, the real solution to the Syrian refugees, is send our Marines into Syria, block off a certain area, and say, this is our area.
This is the safe area.
This is the safe haven. And all of these people come back.
I like that.
And we take care of it. Any of the ISIS people come near us?
Right. Build a small little town
little
and protect
fort.
it.
Yeah, little fort.
And the people want to stay in their country.
They do, absolutely.
They don't want to go there, but they got to live, and it's not safe for them. But there's plenty of land there. You set up something in the desert there, and you can get the supplies, and it's cheaper.
And the Army Corps of Engineers could be setting up buildings and various structures for safety reasons or even hygiene issues, right? They build bridges. I mean, no, that's what we should be doing.
I agree.
And, ISIS can't, I mean, our President of the United States, in his positions in Egypt, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq, pulling all the troops out, just saying, on this day we're out. Guess what happened the next day?
That's right.
In comes ISIS. It's just poor. And the Joint Chiefs said, no, we need to leave a contingent of troops there. And he said, no. And he pulled them out. Yeah. So, I mean, I hate to say this to people at home, but a lot of the problems that we see on TV are created in Washington. There's dysfunction going on.
It really is.
And, hopefully some common sense will start coming in this new election.
Well, yeah, I think really you got to pay attention to the economy, but you also have to pay attention to this worldwide terrorism.
Yep.
Because they'll be coming here next. I mean, especially if you bring a lot of them in. You got people here now.
I was just going to say San Bernardino.
Right.
I mean, the colonel in Fort Hood, Texas.
Yeah.
There's been a number of situations in New York City, and what about the Boston?
That's right.
The brothers. They're
the two brothers for the
I can't their name.
Boston Marathon.
Yeah, I can't remember their name or pronounce their name, but
I can't
young men.
Yeah.
Young men. Yeah. So yeah, we need it.
There's a lot of hate built up in there because and envy, I guess. And, they just want to mess up us. We're fat and happy here.
If you look at the demographic, it's usually young male and obviously of Muslim descent. But not all Muslims are terrorists, right? But I think what we really need to do is stop being politically correct and say these are our problem. And by aligning ourselves with these radical Islamic terrorists, it also allows the Muslims that are in this country that are basically enjoying being here to say, yes, I want to be part of this process. Right now they're sort of in the shadows because they're afraid without the support of the government, they'll see some ramifications in their mosques.
Sure. I mean, they do tighten. Well, you can see what's happened in Europe. They let them feel.
Geez. I can't believe it. I just can't believe it.
Well, you know, you look back in history, and I don't think people learn enough from history. We've had problems when we had immigrants coming over here, and they clustered into it until we worked to get them to be part of
Society.
the community. Yeah. You know, not an enclave.
They assimilate. They
Yeah.
assimilate into America.
But that's what happened way back in the early 1900s. Certain ones were segregated in a way. Well, it's somehow, I don't know if Washington can do that job, but it's something that's needed.
I think if we can take the right steps. I mean, let's use the heroin crisis.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, when the senators get in line and the representatives get in line and they realize that there's a problem that needs to be fixed, we can hold people's feet to the fire. I mean, but I don't think it's just a one-part solution. I mean, there's education, there's treatment, there's a law enforcement piece hasn't really been stressed enough. But you're now starting to see arrests now for the dealers. In talking to the chiefs of police, even in Nashua, he knows where the heroin's coming from, and he's wished the DEA would get more involved. But they're working hard at trying to keep it come in. So it's a multi-pronged approach. But when you can identify a problem and get everybody sort of going in the same direction, things can get done. You know, and the pressure from their constituents, right? It's a problem here, so they hear it and they're trying to do something about it. Hopefully, not politicizing it.
So have you fully organized your campaign now? I mean, do you have?
I'm officially. What did you say? Announced.
Okay.
And I filed the paperwork with the Federal Election Commission. I've also been fundraising, and that's the worst part of the job, to be totally honest with you.
It is.
I mean, people have been very generous, and if anybody at home wants to donate, it's Flanagan, Flanagan, the number 4nh.com. But I've really taken a sort of a feet on the ground approach. Is that I'm going to try to meet as many people as I can within the 6 or 7 months that I have. My opponent doesn't do any of that. She does roundtables with town officials, and she'll do an op-ed and so forth. But you know, people need to get to know me.
Right.
I mean, the UNH poll said that between 75 and 80% didn't know who I was. But of the people that knew who I was, there was almost an equal amount of Democrats and Republicans that liked me. A little bit more Republicans were neutral than Democrats, but about the same on others. So I'm optimistic about that, in that people can see me not overly conservative, but not overly liberal too, sort of in the middle of the road, moderate. And in this district, as you're well aware, Nashua, Concord, Peterborough, Keene, up near Hanover, Lebanon, all the way to the Canadian border. So it's
a lot of territory.
Oh, you know, I'm trying to figure out where the good hotels are, because if I can't really go up for a day.
Yeah.
It's a 3-hour drive to Berlin, you know, or something like that. But I'm scheduling things, and hopefully the weather will get nicer.
Yeah.
Although as we meet there, you can hear the rain pounding on the roof. So.
Are you developing different groups in the different towns? Or you're looking for people to head up something in your
What I'm doing is there are GOP town leaders,
right,
and I reach out to them, and I get on their agendas and so forth. And then what happens is, as I meet people, they get encouraged. They like what they hear, or they like the fact that I'm an honest person, and not necessarily tell them what they want to hear, but tell them the truth. And I've been getting emails about helping out, and obviously some people have been, you know, sending in money to get the campaign going. It's really gratifying to know that you're appreciated and you're doing the right things. I'm not going to make everybody happy, Carl.
No, well, you can't, but you got to get enough to get you in the office.
That's true. That's true. I mean, and you know, for the people that think I'm not conservative enough, you know, there's not much difference. There's a lot of difference between myself and Congresswoman Custer.
I think that's what you have to focus on, those differences.
Yeah.
I personally, I'm not satisfied with what we're getting down there, and I think you'd make a great deal of improvement in there.
Oh, I appreciate that.
If you do get elected, where do you think you want to? What department? What committees do you want to get on?
Actually, 2 of them are. Well, I mean, I have no. How do I say? Finance, or what we know as finance up in Concord. I think that's specific to people that have been on the budget and dealt with the budget a number of years, a number of terms. But, my interest, I'm on the labor committee up in Concord. I've been on there since I've been up there. And I know a little bit about labor law, so that might be one of the areas. But I have been chairman of multiple school boards, SAUs. I was a vice chair of a cooperative school district. And I've got a couple pieces of legislation dealing with schools. So it could be either education or labor. Yeah, those are my interests.
And do you have any idea what you'd want to focus on if you got on either one of those?
Well, one of the things that we were just talking about, the Department of Education, is that I think it's way too big, and I think it has too much power over the states. I think locally people know what's good education and what's bad education. But what I do think would be appropriate is have analysts from Washington based on population in each state so that they can actually share information from one town to the next, what has worked and what hasn't worked. And then every quarter go back to Washington, D.C. and compare and contrast to other states and what they have done. And then if there's something that's better, they can come back again, spend time in New Hampshire, and share that information that they have. So basically, it's really a huge think tank, which would be much more appropriate from a constitutional perspective, is that we want the best education, but sometimes we don't know what the best education really means because we don't have all of the figures. I remember when I was on a cooperative school district, there was a new way of math dealing with what they call manipulatives. And I can't explain to you what it is, but it's really a hands-on approach to math. And the teachers were finding it very, very successful. Well, that's a perfect example. So the analysts can take that back, and when they do other quarterly meetings and say, in Hollis Brookline, they're doing this. Or better yet, before they do it, they can go to Claremont or go to Nashua or whatever. They can share all this information. And I think with all the professionals that we have in the educational process, it would work.
But have you had any experience with our Department of Education? Because it sounds like that's something they could be doing.
Well, there's the Common Core curriculum, I guess if you want to call it, or standards. I was talking to Rick Ladd when I was the majority leader. He's the chairman of the education in the House. I said, we need to start our own curriculum. He says, we ought to actually have one. We're close to having one. And the trouble is, though, we can't force it on each town because each town have local control. But the one thing that I found with the Department of Education here in this state is when they got to know my background, that is working with school boards, my educational background, working with a master's degree and so forth, not in education, but they knew that I have been heavily involved with schools. They actually coveted the fact that I was the majority leader because they knew that we were sort of marching in the same direction. That is, better education, working with the staffs, try to improve. Because ultimately a child only goes through 10th grade once, right? Or second grade once. So we really don't have a chance. Well, they can stay after, but I'm just saying is that, we really need to do the best we can for the kids.
But the approach that they seem to be taking is you have to do it the way we want you to do it, not to convince them that these are the better things to do. Rather than selling it to them, they're forcing it on them.
That's the federal government speaking. And I will tell you that I was invited to Washington, D.C. as majority leader. I met Artie Duncan.
Oh.
Yes. And, we all had our name tags. And I asked him, I said, you're telling us what to do. You're not, you're obviously funding certain things and you're holding back money. I said, but, we're a big local control state. He goes, Representative, I know what you're saying and I hear what you're saying. But I know that when your kids are getting out of high school and they're going to community colleges, they can't pass basic math. I was floored that he knew this. And because I knew it too.
Yeah.
He said that, so basically the objective is to have everybody at least a level playing field. Call it the lowest tier. But the reality was, his point was, we've got to have some sense of accomplishment at all levels. Call it Common Core, call it whatever you want to call it. And I sort of accepted the challenge that if I was still a majority leader, I'd be working on a statewide curriculum that would be challenging and diverse because some kids are smarter than others or more achieving than others, so that we could challenge each student. But I'm vice chairman of labor now. So, but I'm also looking at doing it at a different level.
It's still, whether it's the federal government or the state government, forcing something down on people. Is there a way of selling it so that they want to buy your product?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, and I think my idea was the way to do it. That is, have the analysts come back and say, this is successful, but let's use local experiences to say whether or not, yeah, it would work, or no, it wouldn't work, or we don't have the funding for it, but we could implement it at our own pace. I think that's the way to do it because everybody has a buy-in, right? Whereas right now is they come in, the federal government says, you know, you need to do this, and by the way, this money that we have here, we're not going to give it to you until you do it, or at least try to do it, and then, you know, if it does.
Bribery.
It doesn't, well,
That's
we're being held hostage, really.
Yeah.
But the same thing holds true with the Department of Transportation.
Yeah, oh, yeah, definitely.
You know, I was at a forum dealing with the train here in Nashua, and a gentleman said that we could be actually funding the train if we took our CMAQ money. I don't know what the acronym is, but instead of using it for bridges and roads, do it for the trains.
Well, they have a whole bunch of different categories that the pots that this money is divided up.
Yeah.
And you're right.
What does CMAQ stand for, by the way? Do you know what it means?
I can't remember all the
Acronym?
acronyms that they have. But there are things that they apply, cleaning the air. Like that's actually what's the money's coming from for this proposal on the rail program that they've taken out of the 10-year plan. And we're in a certain geographic area that ties us in with Boston.
Really?
And if we were clean, they took the rail program as a way of reducing the auto traffic and therefore reducing the smog and all the other stuff. And if we had another project that they could attach that type of result to, they'd be able to take it. But that CMAQ money has been supporting the road from Maine. Okay.
Oh yeah, Maine used the.
That is only supposed to run for 4 or 5 years. It's what, 12, 13, 14 years
and
now?
it's not profitable. But then again, someone would say we subsidize roads and bridges too. You know, my opinion of this rail situation has evolved a little bit. I mean, and partially because when I fly into Baltimore to go to Washington D.C., I get on a train and go into D.C. I mean, it is so convenient from my perspective, you know, flying into from Manchester to different hubs. But it's just, you know, you go into Baltimore, you get on a bus, they take you over to the terminal, you pay your $5 or $6.
Yeah, I've done that.
And then you're in D.C.
Yeah.
You're at Union Station.
Yeah.
And then the Capitol building's over here. Now, you know, the White House is a little further down, but, you know, it's just too convenient. And I think the plan right now for the rail is to tie into Lowell, which will ultimately go to North Station and, of course, to the airport. So I don't know how it'll transition or how it'll change. The biggest challenge, though, is the tracks that we want to use won't handle high-speed commuter.
They have to.
It's meant for freight.
This is capital improvement.
Right.
Jack, we've run out of time.
Carl, it just started.
What can you leave our listeners with as far as why they should be helping you get elected?
Well, I have done a lot in Concord, and I think I do the same thing in Washington. My opponent has introduced 22 pieces of legislation in 4 years. Only one has passed. That was the renaming of the FAA Center. So I guess my point is I'm able to work with both parties to try to get consensus, and I think you see that with me in Concord. I'm well respected from all of our colleagues, both sides of the aisle, and I hopefully be able to take that to Washington and show people that we can get things done. That's really what it is, accountable government.
You're a results-oriented person.
Absolutely. Is it really a half an hour, Carl?
How about that? Okay, well, thank you very much for your time.
It's
I appreciate that. Thank you for listening in. And don't forget, this is sponsored by the Nashua Republican City Committee, and we meet at the Crown Plaza the second Thursday of every month. Come join us.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.